Hello, this is Lisa Alewine. Welcome back to the Creation Gospel Study and the 7 Abominations of the Wicked Lamp. And we are finishing up our 7 seals. We are all the way to the 7th seal. We're doing a little bit of a review right now. And in order to wrap this up, we've circled back to take one last look here at the black horse, to maybe pick up a few more ideas about what's happening when the black horse rides out and what he's establishing in the earth for the days of Messiah. Our reference here is Isaiah 60, verses 19 through 22. It's describing the days of Messiah, the messianic reign, and it's describing the land of Israel and how all Israel will be righteous, all Israel will be holy at that time. And he makes a comment. He concludes it with this. He says, the smallest one will become 1,000, and the least one a mighty nation. I, the Lord, will bring it about quickly in its time. So if the smallest one becomes 1,000, and the least one a mighty nation, then it goes along with the expectation that the sages have from reading the prophets, that there will be a complete economic shakeup just prior to the time of Messiah. In other words, Messiah is not going to build on an economic system that already exists. He's going to wipe the slate clean. He doesn't need to build on top of something. He's going to have a new heavens and a new earth. And don't think of it as like brand new. He doesn't need to do that. In Hebrew, chadash, it means renewed just as often as it means new. Like the moon, it's not a brand new moon you see every month. It's just a renewed moon. Your perspective to it has changed over the month. So with the earth being renewed, right, it's the implication there is he's going to wipe every slate clean. He's going to destroy every system. Then he's going to rebuild this era of peace for 1,000 years, but not based upon something that's already established, based upon him wiping it out and starting over. And in order to do that, every system will have to fall. That's kind of the difficult part, because we all depend on the systems of the beast. We come to believe that governments are the answer, or politics is the answer, or great religions are the answer, or a commercial system is the answer, or the medical system is the answer, or the military is the answer. These aren't the answers for King Messiah's questions, because he will build his own. He will build his own government. It says the government will be on his shoulders. The wrath is going to be his to administer. He is the military. Every system that we have leaned upon, the Son of Righteousness will arise with healing in his wings. He will be our healer. He will be our doctor, our medical system. All those hours you've wasted trying to talk to the pharmacy, you don't have to worry about it anymore, because King Messiah will be your healer. Those words will be for the healing of the nations. And so as frustrated as we are with those systems, we tend to scream very loudly when they malfunction. But they're designed to malfunction because they're designed by human beings. And you can see how much faith someone has put in one of those particular systems by how loud they scream when it malfunctions, and when it doesn't meet their expectations. When King Messiah is standing there saying, I told you I was going to destroy all those things. I told you not to lean on those things. You can use those things. You have to live in Babylon. Do like Jeremiah said, pray for the prosperity of the nation where you're living, function there, but don't ever forget where the weight of your faith should be resting. It should be resting on the Holy One, because the more you lean on him, the less disappointed you're going to be when all these beast systems malfunction. The less surprised you will be when those beast systems are used to herd you in a particular direction. That's how beasts work. So the idea that they have for meeting the prophets is that all these systems, and it makes sense because in the Revelation, Look at all the cargoes of Babylon that are destroyed, and it says the merchants of the earth are standing afar off weeping, looking at the smoke of it. They didn't want the whole commercial system to be destroyed because they wanted to continue to profit from it. Well, if you think the supply chain is bad now, wait, it'll get worse. It has to. If these are the footsteps of Messiah, if it's just the footsteps of our generation, it still might get worse. It might recover, it might get worse. You prepare for the worst and the best at the same time, because the worse these systems malfunction, the better and the best it's going to be when King Messiah destroys it all and restarts. That's the idea of the footsteps of Messiah. He just breaks every system. So let's go back to Revelation 6:5. Back to this black horse. It says, when he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, come. I looked, and behold, a black horse, and the one who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine. Now, if we just look at that at the easy level, which we already have, we looked at this at the easy level. Let's say this is the white, the red, the black. If this is your black horse right here, then you're looking at a particular season. If we put this back in the context of the appointed times of the feast days, then what's happening right here is pretty much happening within a week of Passover. What's happening right here would represent Shavuot, and then your fall feasts over here. And so as this black horse rider is going out, he mentions 2 products. He mentions barley. Well, the first fruits of the barley is right here. It corresponds to the black horse. You're going to have Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits of the barley. And then he mentions the price of the wheat. That's right here at Shavuot, the 4th feast. And then he says, don't damage the oil and the wine. The oil and the wine are brought in at Sukkot. Remember, from your wine vat and from your threshing floor. You can bring in any of these products that would have been late coming in the season, but the olive trees just begin to yield at the time of Sukkot. And of course, the wine, it's going to mature later. You'll see the blossoms in the spring. They'll continue to mature through the summer, depending on the location of the grapes and the type of the grapes. And so you begin to bring the wine in at Sukkot. Plus, there's a little allusion there, too, not just in terms of your feasts and your products that you would bring for tithing and first fruits, but it would also make you think of the wine pouring ceremony. The water pouring ceremony, they poured out water and wine at Sukkot. That was part of the Sukkot right there. And he says, don't damage that. Don't damage the oil and the wine. In other words, it's not time. He's putting a GPS right here, but don't damage the oil and the wine. What's really strange is when you look at what these rabbis commented about the tribulation and the 7 years of tribulation, they talk about it being a really anguishing, pretty terrible thing as you're moving here 1, 2, 3. But they're speaking in reference to Israel, in reference to the Jews and how they are experiencing the tribulation. The world might be experiencing tribulation much differently. They say that Israel will undergo a tribulation, the famine and the sword and all these things, but 3.5 years in, there's going to be a turnaround. Not drastic. Well, if you'll remember, the message to Thyatira, the warning there was, if you don't quit messing with the Jezebel woman who's teaching immorality and teaching you to eat things sacrificed to idols, then I will throw her on a bed of sickness and I'll kill her children with her. With a pestilence, with a plague, with a dever, one of those 4 altar judgments. And then he says you will be thrown into great tribulation. So what's from happening from here to here for the rebellious and the rebellious children is great tribulation. But what the rabbis say are happening to the Jews, and I would extrapolate therefore to all Israel, all who were known as children of Abraham, children of the covenant, they say here there's a change begins, and they will start to see a different result, that actually there will be an uptick where there was famine and so forth here. There will be an uptick this year and this year and this year. It will actually be a good year. Pretty amazing, because that's exactly what this voice is saying. Here, well, to here, because he's talking about wheat. Here, you're only getting a daily wage. It takes everything you make in a day to get the food you eat. But he's saying, don't damage the oil and the wine. In other words, it seems that he's predicting a turnaround, that these will not be harmed. Number one, it's not their season yet, if he's here. But if we're looking again at how the rabbis see the tribulation, there will be a turnaround mid-trib, 3.5 years in for the righteous. We don't know if that's true or not. Take it with a grain of salt, but it does seem very consistent with what the voice is saying concerning the black horse. One other thing we could notice about the black horse, because he's the third in the sequence, that he's also, shouldn't have put it down, should I? The black horse, if he's riding out here, this is going to be first fruits of the barley, which is considered a resurrection day. It's the third day. Corresponds to the time that Yeshua rose from the dead. But remember, the black horse, these horses ride on their circuits, because there's only 4 horses for the 7 seals. So the white horse goes on his circuit, the red horse on his circuit, the black horse on his circuit. The thing to notice about the black horse, he circles through a resurrection day here at First Fruits of the Barley, and then he circles through a resurrection day here at the Feast of Trumpets, which is when the resurrection is thought to occur, at the Feast of Trumpets. Both resurrection days. So that's good news. You know, it sounds like bad news, but it is good news for the righteous. At any rate, as this black horse is riding out, he's triggering a fear of economic judgment. He's triggering a fear of famine because of the prices that he's calling out. And he mentions the barley and the wheat. Barley represents a judgment, again, associated with the time of Pesach. Wheat, the time of Shavuot. But notice that the price is the same. Kind of going back to, what did the rabbis predict about the footsteps of Messiah? He was going to wipe out the commercial system of the world and rebuild it. And so the price that's being called out here is 1 denarius. It doesn't matter whether you get the quart of wheat or the 3 quarts of barley, it's 1. It's the same amount, a denarius, just 1 denarius. So what's special about a denarius? Well, it comes from a Greek word meaning containing 10. So a denarius contains 10. It was a Roman silver coin. It says it took its name from it being equal to 10 asses. I'm assuming they mean donkeys. It was the principal silver coin of the Roman Empire. And it says, and I'm looking here at the Bible dictionary, from the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, it would seem that a denarius was then the ordinary pay for a day's wages. 1 day's pay. Okay, I want you to imagine, I don't know what you get paid for a work day, but just imagine that whatever the amount of money you were paid today, unless it's Shabbat, it took every penny after Pharaoh and Caesar's taxes And of course, all your other beast systems that kind of dip in there. And so think of your net amount on your paycheck for that day. What if it took every penny of that just to buy enough food for the day? That's the principle of the denarius. So it also represents the number 10. And so for an unskilled laborer, if you were a skilled laborer, obviously you could make more than a denarius in a day. But for the unskilled laborer for a day's work, you would get 1 denarius. That means all they're getting is their daily bread. That's all. Now it's up to him whether he wants to buy 3 quarts of barley or whether he wants to buy 1 quart of wheat. The price is going to be the same. It's going to cost him in its season a denarius. But it was a dry measure, and it's what the average male, would eat per day. It doesn't sound like you've got a lot left over to work with. There's no extras there. It's just enough to keep you alive each day. And if you don't work 7 days a week, which shouldn't be, should be working 5 or 6. But if you're not working on Shabbat, then you would even have less food than what you could eat on those work days, because you would have to stretch it out and have enough left over for Shabbat, which I don't think it's about Shabbat at this point. It's just a matter of letting you know that during this phase, people can expect to have daily bread. Period. Let's look at Matthew 20, verse 1. And it's a parable of the vineyard. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard." 1 denarius, a day's work, 1 denarius. "He went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. To those he said, 'You go into the vineyard also, and whatever is right, I will give you.'" He doesn't bargain for a certain amount. He just says, "I'll make it right." So they went. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did the same thing. Not telling them what they're going to get, just sending them. And here the Greek word can also mean near. And where it says about the 11th hour, it should probably read and near the 11th hour. He went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day long?" And they said to him, "Because no one hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." He doesn't even promise to pay him anything. He just says, "Go. Go in the vineyard. You may not get anything." Now when the evening came, the owner of the vineyard, and it's almost evening when this occurs, by the way, with this last group. Now when the evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, starting with the last group first." The last group first. That's the key to the parable. When those hired about the 11th hour came, each one received a denarius. See, they weren't even promised anything. He just said, "Go in the vineyard at the 11th hour." And so when those who were hired first came, they thought they would receive more. But each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they grumbled at the landowner, saying, "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day's work in the scorching heat." But he answered and said to one of them, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go. But I want to give to this last person the same as you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I want with what is my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? So the last shall be first, and the first last." All right, I want to point out a little bit of an anomaly here if you're reading biblical literature. Often it will say, like this one, the last shall be first and the first last. All right, the last were first only in the sense that he gave them their pay first. But they received the exact same pay as the last. So this is an expression that's used to show how things become equal. It doesn't mean that the last are now first and uppermost and they got way more money. That's not what he's saying. They got the same as, and he actually paid them first. And like another example of this, Yeshua says, there's none born of woman greater than John the Baptist, but the least in the kingdom is greater than he. He doesn't mean the least in the kingdom is greater than John the Baptist in importance. He's using this same expression where he's saying that John the Baptist, he's no better in terms of the denarius principle than the least in the kingdom. It's not that the least in the kingdom is over John the Baptist. He's saying they're equal. One is the same as the other in terms of value of human life. And so that might help you maybe in some other contexts if you weren't aware of what's going on there. But it's a matter of asking people to relinquish what they believe they are entitled to and conditioning them to the expectation that just prior to the footsteps of Messiah, what is expected is a worldwide economic crash, that these systems will be crashed. People will think they're doing it on purpose. They will do it for evil purposes, but they're just, they're being allowed to do that. That's what's decreed. This is what has to happen because King Messiah is not going to build on top of their twisted systems. And so he's saying, don't be so obsessed by and so proud of your property and your paycheck and what you think you have coming for the amount of work you put into the kingdom that you're not willing to turn loose of what you've had. There's going to be a great equalization. We can see it back in Genesis 45:20 when Joseph is talking to his brothers and he's about to rescue them from a famine. You see the comparison here we're trying to make, that one of the altar judgments is famine. How can you prepare for that? Pray for daily bread. Because you might have to do some moving around in order to be in the proper place at the proper time. Joseph says, do not concern yourselves with the property, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. In other words, I'm going to take care of everything during this period. It's not a normal period. He says, I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about your property. Don't worry about what you're going to leave there. You'll go back to it eventually. Long time. And then in 45:23 we read, and to his father Joseph sent the following, 10 male donkeys. Remember what we said the value of a denarius was? The dictionary says it's worth 10 asses. Well, right here we have 10 male donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and sustenance for his father on the journey. He's saying, leave what you have there. Don't try to carry it. I'm going to supply every need you have on this journey, and I'm going to protect you. And this is actually thought to be a prophecy, not just a negotiation here of how to get dad to a safe place. This is thought to be a prophecy of Israel's deliverance from Egypt at the Exodus. That they're not going to need anything. Really, he's just going to say, go. Have your sandals on your feet, have your belt buckled, have your staff in your hand, and be ready to go. Don't worry about what you're leaving behind. Don't try to take more than you can carry. There's a connection here. Remember, the vineyard is Israel. And so from Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets, until Yom HaKippurim, 10 days later, there's an opportunity for work of repentance in Israel. On the first day, you can be written into the book of life. But what if you weren't? Well, 10 days later, almost touching the 11th hour, we're talking about sundown and the 12 hours of day. They're not literal 12 hours because in temple times it was these 12 hours. And the day would shorten and lengthen depending on the sun, but it was still 12 hours. So it wasn't constant in that sense. But at the 11th hour, remember, it's almost sundown. We're almost into another day. When the sun goes down, you could still be written into the book of life, almost touching that hour. And so we're judged as individuals on Rosh Hashanah, and then we're judged as a collective, a nation, on Yom HaKippurim. And then together we rejoice at Sukkot. We're one minyan, and a minyan is 10. It's 10 people. It's the minimum number of a congregation. If you can get 10 people together, you have prayer in Judaism. So the 10 is the minimum number. It's based on at least 10 righteous people in Sodom. No, they're not there. They're going to be judged. The 10 evil spies give a report, so the whole nation can't go in. And they're called an evil congregation. So that's the model. And so a denarius, it's not really a random amount. If it's the value there is 10, it's like the value of 10 people. It's like this is a collective. It's showing how you are a collective. You're judged at Rosh Hashanah. They're at that first hour. And it's also represented by days, hours and days. But by the sealing up at Yom Kippur, if somebody repents in the final hour, don't be looking around and saying, well, yeah, my name was written in the book of life way back at Feast of Trumpets 10 days ago, and look at you sliding into home base here. Just as the gates close, you're running in there. Well, you don't look down on them for that, because Yom Kippur is about being judged as a collective. You should be glad that they slid into home base and they decided to repent. That way we can go into Sukkot as a people, a minyan, the people represented by the number 10. And so in this prophecy, we see Joseph functioning as Mashiach ben Yosef, or Messiah ben Joseph. He's a suffering servant. He's drawing Israel into Egypt in order to leave their property in the land. They're not supposed to worry about their property. They're not going to lose their best. And what is their best? Well, their best is going to be their descendants, their sons and daughters, all the way to us. We are also their sons and daughters. We are all children of Abraham. And so what will return to the land? A tested congregation, a minyan, represented by the number 10. The best of the land of Egypt that will go back to Israel is the descendants of the 12 tribes, the descendants of Abraham. And this is what Joseph is saying. He's representing it by sending out the best physical products to sustain his father and brothers on the journey. And he's saying, look, I'm prophesying of a time when you're going to have to trust the Messiah, that he will provide everything you need on this journey. So don't worry about what you're leaving behind, because in the time to come, once you've descended to Egypt, you've stayed there too long, then you become slaves. He will come and he will redeem you. He will bring you out at the Exodus, and it's going to be the same thing in reverse. Don't worry about what you're going to leave behind in Egypt. He will provide the best of everything on your journey. But understand, you are the best of Egypt. You are what he's worried about. From the least to the greatest, it will be a great equalizer, and you will all come out together. You will be one nation, one collective. And you should be glad and rejoice that, can come home.